Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week of Bible News Radio. I'm so glad that you're here, that you've joined us today. My name is Stacy Linda Harvey. I am your host, and I want to welcome you to this week's very special episode of the show. You know, when I first started this program almost 20 years ago, my guest today was one of the very first people that I got to connect with. And if you have never heard of Linda Harvey, then today you are in for a treat, because to me, she's one of America's unsung heroes. And I really mean that, because there are so many people out there who are doing God's work and they don't get the credit that they're due. And so in just a minute, I'm going to play you the interview that we did earlier this week. But first, before we get to that, I want to tell you, please go over to our website, BibleNewsRadio.com. You can go over there. You can learn a little bit more about our ministry, Heart Tug International. You can look at, join our email list. You can learn about my book, Pickleball Faith, Inspiration on and Off the Court. And I know, hey, there are people who are making fun of this book, but you really shouldn't make fun of the book. You know why? Because it's a good book. It's about relationships, and it's actually changing people's lives. And so check it out over there. You can get an autographed copy if you so desire through our website there. Join my email list. I send out an email a couple times a week that gives updates on our Bible studies and our show, and I send out news. We also have a blog tab on our website. Make sure you go over there, check that out, as I send out a lot of stuff on that blog, which you get notified about first through the website. So let me tell you a little bit about Linda Harvey. She is the founder of Mission America. You need to go to missionamerica.com. She writes articles on social issues, current issues. She's actually an expert on the gay lobby, on the homosexual agenda. She has a radio show on the Salem Radio Network that can be heard on 880 AM WRFD. You can go to WRFD.com, go there. She's also a regular contributor to conservative news sites, and she's interviewed all the time on conservative and Christian mainstream media outlets. She writes for WorldNet Daily. You can go to WND.com. She has two Christian books, two. One is called Maybe He's Not Gay, Another View on Homosexuality, and her other one is Not My Child, Contemporary Paganism and the New Spirituality. Here's some other things that Linda has also accomplished. She has been a popular conference speaker and a media representative at a United Nations conference, which is amazing. That's absolutely amazing. She's spoken at many Tea Party groups. She's testified on social issues before the state legislative committees in her state. She serves on the National Pro-Family Forum and the Ohio Pro-Family Forum. She has served as an abstinence education grant reviewer at the Ohio Department of Health. And I know there's so much more than that. She is a very, very powerful woman of God. And she has a BA in English, and she's done graduate work. She's a wife, a mom, a grandmother, and she lives in Columbus, Ohio, where a lot of you are in Ohio. And she is no stranger to trying to deal with exposing the underbelly of what's happening in our culture with the homosexual lobby. So it is my privilege to share with you the interview that we did earlier this week. And I hope you take the time to sit back, get some paper, make some notes, and put Linda in on one of the people that you listen to and you follow, because she's got inside info that you're not going to hear, frankly, in the liberal mainstream media. You're not going to, because they're not going to tell you it. So I hope you enjoy the interview, and thank you for tuning in this week. Hi, Linda. Just want to say welcome to the show. I am so glad that you're here. It's been like forever. And I want to publicly thank you for being one of the very first people almost 20 years ago who actually connected with me and our ministry when we first started almost 2 decades ago. I know you've been doing this for a while, and neither one of us looks older, do we?
Oh, no, not at all. Oh, Stacy, it's great to be with you.
Yeah. Hey, so I know, I'm get to introduce you to my audience. Now, everybody, I already told you a little bit about Linda already, but one thing I just have to tell you is I think that you are an unsung hero. I really do. Because to me, there's so few people who can be steadfast and take on the issues that you take on without getting vilified both by unbelievers and the gay community and the church. I mean, we get it from both sides. And so, to me, you're an unsung hero, kind of up there with Phyllis Schlafly, and other people. So, I'm honored you're on my show. Thank you for coming.
Honored to be on your show. You're the same. I mean, this is, as you said, how did the years go by and we're all still doing this? I mean, it's amazing, but God calls us and we will continue for as long as we can, right?
Yeah. Okay. So Mission America, tell everybody a little bit about, well, first tell everybody how you came to Christ, because I think that's always important to know.
Yeah. The story is much longer than this, but essentially I grew up in a home where we went to church. We went during my teenage years anyway, went to an Episcopal church, and we know what the Episcopal church has come to be. And back then it was not a lot better. It was not as radical as it is now. But I was really never discipled in the word. But after going to church every week, you get a familiarity with the word. And I went off to college in the 70s and never darkened the door of a church again for 20 more years. And it was my husband, Tom, who got me going back to church. It was the Catholic church. And we went there for a while, and I began to get back in touch with my Protestant roots, I guess, and being more grounded in the Bible. And eventually, I just thought, I think dangerously enough, I think I believe the Bible, which was the first time that had ever happened. And I had been a liberal agnostic up until then. At one point, I was even a Planned Parenthood volunteer for a short time. God forgive me, but wow. I believe he has. But praise God, it was only a short time because I moved and I never reconnected. But that's where my heart was at. And so when I'm here and I've got several small children, I'm thinking about the world from their standpoint, and then I'm now reading the Bible and I'm thinking, wait a minute, I think I believe this. Oh dear, what does that mean? It means I'm going to lose a lot of friends because even back this is the early 90s, even back then it was intellectual sort of suicide to say, I believe the Bible, is the word of God. And people go, how they go, oh, really? Really? And they back away from you. They don't trust you anymore. And so, yes, we lost some friends and then moved away from, frankly, the Catholic Church because I wanted to go to a church where they were preaching the word. And eventually my husband left also, and he became a believer, and we went to an evangelical church. So we've moved to various churches since then. But then the next thing I did was, because my profession is that I have been in marketing and public relations for in the healthcare and insurance areas, primarily for my full-time career. I put my hand up and I said, Lord, what can I do? Because I was now more aware of issues and all of that. And I was drawn to the pro-life movement and drawn to many other issues. But the one that kept coming back, because it was the hardest to figure out, was the homosexuality issue. And I kept looking, I was starting to look at what was being published then. This is right around the internet's debut, as to what was going on in schools. And I had children, and I had late elementary school, early elementary school children, and I started thinking, if this really takes hold in the schools, this is going to play and mess with kids' minds at a very vulnerable time. And I sure hope somebody does something about this. And I kept praying that prayer. Boy, I sure hope somebody does something about this. And eventually, all of a sudden, I got this feeling of, uh-oh, you can't mean me, Lord. Do you mean me? Please don't make it be me. But, kind of ran away from it for a few months. And then I kept feeling this burden, and I came back to it. And he showed me not only how I could do this, but he equipped me along the way. He has a great sense of humor, I believe, because he uses very unlikely people, because I'm one of those people that I really love for people to approve of me and talk about the one issue today that would make people not approve of you. That's a big one. Yep. So that's the main issue I've been covering. I've covered many other issues right now in the schools. I'm very involved in trying to show people how critical race theory influenced lessons are in the schools and those kinds of things. And of course, the pro-life issue. But that's 1995 is when Mission America was founded, with our website. And we had a printed newsletter for a while. And then now I'm on the radio in Ohio on a Salem station weekly, and actually commentary every day. So, and then interviews like this. So that's where we are.
Well, I'm honored that you're here. You talk about how the one topic that people will hate you for, this is it. I mean, honestly, people don't like, I was confessing to somebody recently, I'll post something on Facebook, right? Just as an example, I might say, yeah, homosexuality is a sin and gay pride. I mean, I was talking about homosexual, you say homosexual, don't say gay, but, homosexual pride month with all their flags. I was using this mobile app that's designed to help kids. Mm-hmm. And they put in 13 homosexual pride flags in that app, which is a self-development app, has nothing to do with it. Drove me crazy. And you say something about it and you get glared at by believers.
Yes.
And I'm just like, what part of the Bible do you people not understand,
What Bible are you reading,
Well, they're not. And that's part of the problem, right? Now I went to GLSEN conferences as a marriage and family therapist. I also went to a SESCAL conference, which I don't know if you're aware of that one, but that was a counseling conference held in San Diego a number of years ago for therapists. I was actually a school counselor for 3 years in California, and they tried to indoctrinate me into, making my office homosexual friendly. And I'm just like, okay, I'm trying to tell people this is really happening, and it is like going over people's head. They don't want to hear it. And yet you in Ohio, and I know some other friends, we got quite a few people in Ohio, seems to be a stomping ground for people, who've been going to school boards and trying to expose this stuff and critical race theory now. I mean, did you ever think it would get so insane?
Well, I thought it would get somewhat insane, but I'm sure, and many other people I know in the pro-family movement over the years, we're all looking at each other and saying, we never predicted how dominant this, first of all, that agenda would become, how powerful, yep. How completely unwilling to examine the truth or facts that so many people are, including believers, because you don't even have to be a believer to believe this is wrong. All you have to do is look at the evidence all around us,
right?
Of sexuality and the gender confusion and the facts backing it up. The dysfunction, the high risk that accompanies all of this, it's a self-evident problem, but many people just don't want to look at this, and that's where we are.
So before we get into one of your latest articles on that, one of the questions I wanted to address with you has to do with the Southern Poverty Law Center, right? Mm-hmm. So those of you who watched me for a long time, you already know this group is a hate group, really, in the truest sense. They might have started out on good terms, but all of a sudden, Linda, she's a hater. And because of their designation, you recently were uninvited to speak someplace, which is completely insane. Tell us about that, because when I read that, I was like, of course.
Well, I've been writing about the SPLC for a long time. They put me on their hate group list in 2012.
Congratulations, you've made it.
I won't go through something I put on my radio show. I won't go through all the details of it, but it's basically a stance on homosexuality. I never said anything that qualifies that. And so they put Mission America on their hate group list. And I believe these folks are trying to raise money and they're trying to pad their numbers because I have so many pro-family friends, you do too, who absolutely do not belong on this list alongside neo-Nazis and the Ku Klux Klan. And of course, people that don't know us, they want SPLC's goal is to, cause guilt by association. So you look on that list and you think, wow, this must be a really radical person. I don't have time to investigate all this person has done. So I'll just take the SPLC's word for it. Don't take their word for it. They're lying. They're absolute lies. So I had this, we have a bill in Ohio. It's House Bill 616 that was introduced about 2 months ago. And it is the Ohio version of the very controversial Florida, kind of like the Florida Parental Rights Bill, what they called the Don't Say Gay bill.
Right.
They were a group that is a public forum in the city of Columbus, the Columbus Metropolitan Club, where, thought thinkers and people who debate current issues are invited on panels over a long lunch to the business community to present, various issues. Well, they were planning a panel on this House Bill 616, our version of the Parental Rights Bill. In this bill, it not only would ban teaching of sexual orientation and gender identity in kindergarten through third grade, but also would ban anything related to critical race theory teaching in all grades. So it's a double whammy, which I love it. I love this bill because critical race theory is phony baloney. It's not equitable. It's not equality. If you look at it, it's racial politics and it's a complete con job. But anyway, so I was invited to be on this panel. They were looking sort of desperately for a conservative. They had one, but 5 other people were there who were obviously on the other side, the homosexual activist group, a very biased Columbus Dispatch reporter. And so the executive director calls me and invites me on this panel. And I said, great, this is wonderful. Within 6 hours, calls me back and says, I'm going to have to uninvite you from this panel. And I'm thinking to myself, why would this be? I think I know. And sure enough, I said, what is the reason? Well, someone alerted me that you're on the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate group list. And this is a line that we just can't cross. And saying, what line? I do not deserve that designation. Themselves are a smear campaign hate group. They are not a government entity. They're a private group. They have a right to their opinion, but their opinions are based on, it's a smear campaign.
Yeah.
I said, so what, how did you learn about this? Well, it was from a stakeholder. He would not tell me who it was. I said, well, you know what? We're stakeholders too. Mm-hmm. The conservative Christian community, we're stakeholders too. And so that was that. And so I wrote about it. He seemed genuinely caught in the middle, but obviously juggling a lot of politics. And they went ahead and had it. And then a conservative radio talk show host who reported about my situation, they asked him to go. And he came back and he said, is it okay with you if I take this slot? I didn't mean for them to ask me. I said, go for it because we need conservatives.
Yeah.
Okay. So he did a really good job.
But okay. And go. So yeah. And everybody, this type of stuff happens all the time, right? And yet one of the things that drives me nuts is, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't the Southern Poverty Law Center, didn't the FBI stop using them as a source because of their bias at some point because they went off the deep end?
They lost a lawsuit on a Muslim related issue, and I'm forgetting all the details about it. It was a Muslim group. and this is maybe 6 years ago.
That was a while.
During the, I believe it was the early Trump years, they were taken off any kind of, because they used to be used as a reference point, even used to provide trainings to the Department of Justice.
Right.
Back when they were actually covering the Ku Klux Klan and the skinheads and all of that, they were considered having expertise on that. But they just went off the deep end and decided they were going to pad their numbers because, frankly, there aren't that many people that are Ku Klux Klan, neo-Nazi people. They'd love to be able to substantiate the fact that there are, tons of white supremacists out there and neo-Nazis. There are not that many numbers of those people, but there are conservative Christians, and they want people to associate the two. So
going then to an article I read. I don't know if you saw this on WorldNet Daily. I think it was by David Kupelian, where they were talking about, and it was just this past week, where they were talking about how they're using Christian nationalist now as a pejorative against Christians, trying to blame us. And that goes to, the reason I bring this up is because, whoever controls the language controls the debate.
Exactly.
Right. And so that's part of what you're trying to fight and expose. But it's like,
so frustrating because yes, there's smear campaigns. The whole January 6th thing is just out. The double standards in this company. There's like a two-tiered series of justice. I mean, not that I think that was the wisest situation going on, but it's way overblown. It's just, and that's part of the patriotism, Christianity, traditional Judeo-Christian values are all lumped into a package now. And this is what we're fighting in schools. This critical race theory kind of thinking, it's all part of white privilege and white supremacy. No, it's it's just nonsense. The dumbed down presentation of these ideas to our children could not be worse. Our kids do not understand basic issues because they're getting nothing in most cases but sheer propaganda.
Yeah. What's interesting is last month, I attended probably 10 Zoom meetings that the LGBT community held. Okay. They were all on Eventbrite. So I went and just signed up. I was like, hey, I want to hang out with you, community, and I want to see what's going on behind the scenes. And I will tell you, I came away with a couple of things. I actually sat in a meeting in Westminster. People who teach there at the college, and there were transgenders, everybody basically, and they did their pronoun and all that stuff, and they were lamenting the fact that the corporations have co-opted their community and they don't care about their community. And I actually recorded it. I screen recorded the meeting. There was actually one guy who was also lamenting the fact that they couldn't prance around naked like they do in Folsom. And there was a young boy on there who was 24. I guess age is all relative. Never used to think 24 was young, but anyway. And this kid talked about how he went to his very first gay pride parade when he was 9. Okay. Now, that was in the UK. Then I sat in on some other meetings, and they were all lamenting the fact that nobody pays attention to them. So it was really, really sad because the underlying monster that nobody wants to look at, and which drives me up a wall, and which I know you understand, is the abuse of this community. The population has been abused, and it's not only blatant in the schools. I mean, it's like, what person in their right mind would want to support a school that's actually abusing children? I remember going to a GLSEN conference, or maybe it was the SESCAL one. No, it was the SESCAL one, where they were talking about doing the puberty blockers, and they were upset. The guy was lamenting the fact that they couldn't find doctors to actually do this to kids, right? And I actually raised my hand and I said, I have a question, just because I'm curious. what are you going to do with all the research with child development that shows that, this is what happens at certain stages of development? And this transgender individual responds back to me, oh, we don't worry about that. We'll just rewrite it afterwards. We'll publish our own research and rewrite it. And that's what happens. And people don't know it. And you feel like you're a crazy person because you're like, hey, the emperor has no clothes. And, and yeah, all this stuff is going on. So I share all that because I know you wrote this book too, Suicide, Sex, and the School Trauma Cult, which drives me crazy because they'll say, well, you can't tell your kid that they're gay because they'll kill themselves. So you get one of two choices, either a gay kid or a dead kid. And that was literally taught at this counseling conference I went to. So
they thoroughly believe this, and the left thoroughly believes that if a child exhibits one tiny bit of a draw toward homosexuality or toward changing their gender, if you deny them their full expression and 100% affirmation, go right to it, that child is at way higher risk of suicide. When the actual statistics that we get out of Europe show that years later, people that transition are still at extremely high risk of suicide. It does not solve the problem because there's an underlying other problem that draws people to gender confusion or to homosexuality. You don't naturally gravitate toward something that so completely defies your body, either homosexuality, which that choice cuts off a lot of things. It cuts off the ability to ever have a child with the person you love. That's one huge thing that you cut off your options. You cut off many other options too. But not to mention the spiritual dimension of separation from God, the further you go down that road. But there's just so many reasons not to go down those roads. And we are affirming children in these lifestyles and promoting it full tilt. I mean, the promotion in the schools has become so blatant that you can't even, it's hard to describe the kinds of things we're seeing. It is full on propaganda. And in most schools, there's no other viewpoint. And then we wonder why children are anxious, depressed, and a higher percentage of those who are anxious and depressed are the ones that express identities that are non-binary, queer, homosexual, whatever, gender confused. So we're manipulating children when they're vulnerable, opening up all of this often in a very graphic and obscene way, because inclusive sex ed is graphic and obscene because it includes, anal sex and, how you can manage that safely, which you never can. And other kinds of medical nonsense like that. They believe that you can do this. And then the kids, and they're surprised when they have to hire more, or they don't have to, but they are hiring more social workers and counselors in schools to further confuse kids and keep all this from parents. The secrecy dimension in schools is now the National School Boards Association, everybody, they're advising schools to not out a child, which is criminal. It is criminal activity, I believe.
I agree. I was actually a school counselor at California Elementary School, which is the elementary school in California, named California Elementary School, down in Costa Mesa, which is a pretty good area. Mm-hmm. And for 3 years. 3 years. So I wasn't just there 5 months or whatever. I spent most of my internship as a therapist at that school. And I can tell you, I saw probably over a third of that population of the school, for kids. That's how many kids I saw. And there were some who were identifying as homosexual. And I remember, I had to talk to the principal because, obviously the principal was part of my I had to deal with the teachers and stuff. But the principal was like, well, you can't change from this. There's, you have to affirm blah, blah, whatever. And I'm like, well, first of all, here's some other resources you might want to look at, right? It's the same thing with the abortion issue. When I went through all my training, they were talking about, well, we have this big book to refer people to. And I'll never forget it because I was in a supervisory meeting and one of the other persons came up and they said, yeah, I have a client who's pregnant, doesn't want to have the baby. She wants to know where she can go get an abortion. And the very liberal supervisor who signed off my hours made a comment. And she said, does anybody else have a comment? I said, I have a comment. My comment is, how about we refer her to a crisis pregnancy center, because there's options there. This woman doesn't want to kill her kid, obviously. She's in therapy talking about this. And the supervisor says, oh my gosh, you're one of those. I go, yeah. I said, I go to parades, I root for life. And then she says, I already like you, which makes this really difficult. And she tells the other therapist, she's like, go ahead, listen to Stacy. But they don't want both sides of the story. And then they cry about the abuse. And it's like, to me, the most horrific thing about that is they're not telling the parents.
Yes, right. The parents as the enemy is the new approach that the left-leaning education schools are training these teachers, these young teachers. Some of them are themselves sexually compromised, but
Right.
some are not. They're just clueless. They're being told, you need to free these children to be who they are, because the research tells you that everybody's born. Some kids are born in the wrong sex body. Some kids are born gay, and don't let their Judeo-Christian traditional minded parents keep these children from being who they are, and they may be abused. It's a complete package of nonsense that does not hold up when you start to look at it.
Right.
Only very small, tiny percentage of parents abuse their children, period. And on this issue, a ton of parents would not, unfortunately today, they're going to go along with it. So the number who will object, first of all, that's their right. They are the ones that have the right to raise. They're responsible for the education, the housing, the medical care. They're the legal guardians. You do not have a right to take a very serious subject like this in a child's life, probably maybe the most serious thing that could ever happen to them other than physical harm in childhood, and keep this from parents. This is criminal. And that all these organizations, the NEA, the National School Boards Association, that are recommending this, we need to do something about this. This should be a class action lawsuit if we could ever do it.
So that brings me to my next question then. missionamerica.com, everybody go there. Go to missionamerica.com. What is it that you help people do? Because, we could talk about this problem all day, but what's the solution? And how can we get more people to, how do you overcome the fear that so many people have of getting involved because they don't want the backlash? Who does, right? What's your answer to that? Go ahead. Dare you to answer that, Linda.
The major thing that I am is a media person, because what drew me into this whole issue is the fact that I never heard this before. Why haven't I heard this before? I was furious. All the pieces I was putting together, and even if it's not presented from a strictly Christian standpoint, it could be presented just from a conservative standpoint. People need to hear this. Just like any other media person, I can support people, and I do. People will say, how do I do this? But if you're a Christian, you need to be convicted about this and then go and do the right thing. Courage is what I'm encouraging people to have. But first, they need the information.
Right.
A lot of people will say, this can't be true. When I first heard a lot of this stuff, I thought, this is a joke, right? This can't be happening, or else people would be up in arms. They weren't up in arms, and they're not up in arms now as much. They are more than they used to be, and that's the good news. So I'm part of several coalitions in Ohio. So I wear two hats. I'm a media person, but I'm also activist person. So in Ohio, there's a Protect Ohio Children network that I'm part of, and we are getting whistleblower information confidentially from schools, the teachers, from staff, and from parents, posting it on the other, I'm on the board of this, protectohiochildren.net. The 600 school districts in Ohio, we have over 100 where we have information about it's critical race theory. It's about comprehensive sex education and social emotional learning, all of which dovetail with the LGBTQ stuff as well. We have a lot of information. And so once parents post that, they're able to take this to their local school boards. And we're also starting a new thing called the Academic Accountability Project, which takes data from the Ohio Department of Education and shows reading literacy proficiency, math proficiency, science proficiency. And guess where the curve is? It's right down, on almost all of these schools. And it isn't just COVID. This is 2018, 2019. Suddenly there was a dive. It's about the time all of this social emotional learning, all the consultants were hired, this really kicked in as far as critical race theory before the George Floyd issue. And so schools were starting to devote a lot more time to social engineering, a lot less time to academics. And guess what? Everybody, Democrat, Republican, progressive, conservative, can agree that they would like their children to get more attention to academics.
Yeah, I agree. Now, did you see that Bill Maher, I think it was Bill Maher, I think Peter LaBarbera put it on his website. Bill Maher came out against the whole transgender thing. And he is not part of the vast right-wing conspiracy people. He is a flaming liberal, relatively funny at times. In this particular case, he wasn't funny, but he was blatant and to the truth about that. One of the things that he said, and everybody, if join my email list, you'll get that link. I'll send it again. But one of the things that he talked about was how kids are crazy. That they want to be this one day, this another day. So how can you expect them to be whatever,
Well, he talked about the fact that he wanted to be a pirate, and he was so glad parents didn't schedule him for having his leg cut off and one eye taken out. I mean,
right.
This is criminal what's happening to kids. And these major children's hospitals around the country have gender clinics, and they are starting social transitioning of kids, preschoolers. This is criminal. These kids are going to be deformed. That is exactly what's happening. This is mutilation. There's no research that backs this up. Nothing. They're going on. If you ever doubted that education can still make you a complete fool, look at the medical community today. They have been co-opted, so many of them, by left-wing politics, and they don't need research to back it up. It's simply, if this is the prevailing trend, we're going to go for it, and we're going to make it up as we go along. That's what they're doing, and children are suffering as a result.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Well, and the APA, the American Psychological Association, I think Satan is so diabolically clever.
Mm-hmm.
Because when and I've talked about this, when he got the homosexual diagnostic removed, right, which didn't have anything to do with reality, it was all activism. But now they've even changed some of the stuff, even about pedophilia. Now I know you're aware of this. Let's talk a little bit about that, because I actually have some girlfriends who I went to grad school with who told me that I was crazy for some of the stuff I talked about regarding the LGBT stuff. And I said, okay, what about if they begin to normalize pedophilia? Well, then I won't believe it. I'm like, really? Because it's coming down the pike here. So tell us what you know about that, because that's really even where this is leading even more so, and that nobody is talking about except you and me, a couple other people.
Here's how I see this it's happening in spotty areas already. There are activists that are presenting this here and there. But the way this is going to, I think, manifest itself, and already is beginning to, Let's take the Florida parental rights bill, where they banned the promotion and teaching, I'm paraphrasing here, of sexual orientation and gender identity K through 3. And then the left went bonkers. Why can't we present this? We won't be able to tell our children that that I'm a gay teacher, or, I won't be able to talk about my partner, same-sex partner, and so on. None of that is really true. But, okay, this is not a big deprivation for you to not be able to do that to little children. Maybe you need to rethink where you're at. Well, where this is going to happen is, I believe, that children, they want to present these options to kids in the transgender issue really blatantly to small children. And then also the option of homosexuality and identifying in any of the LGBT spectrum to little children. This is their part of non-discrimination policy in school covering sexual orientation and gender identity. They're presenting it as their right.
Okay.
It as sexual rights, as identification rights. And this is why they're fighting against parental notification of all of this, because I think they want to be able to position this as a civil rights issue. You have no right to deny your 9-year-old the option to identify as a homosexual boy or whatever. You have no right. In fact, you're helping him to commit suicide. And then they want this backed up all by counseling. So where this gets into pedophilia is, if a child has a right to identify that way, don't they have a right to have a relationship in whatever way they want with another boy, or with another same-sex person, or with an adult? And when pregnancy is not involved, it gets very much like, well, what's the harm? Hasn't that been the argument all along? Who's this harming?
Right.
And they'll be able to say there is no long-term harm, that, for children to have a relationship with someone older. I think that's where the wedge is coming in here. And not everybody who's on the side of the activists understands that's where they're going. But the other piece of this, if I might just elaborate, is the just of innocence. See, this is something that is another activist person that I've been in touch with, John Euler. You may know him from Facebook, but he's also a psychologist. He's done some incredibly insightful things about, especially the trans community. He really made me sit up and start thinking about this. There is a truly demonic element here as a person gets deeper and deeper into denying their actual identity in Christ, or as a heterosexual, as God designed them, male or female, and go into homosexuality or gender deviance. Becomes more and more a desire to defile, the desire to corrupt children, and the offense of innocence. The offense of the innocence of children becomes more and more prevalent. And you'll even see this positioned within racial politics, within schools, that the innocence of a child is part of white privilege. It's part of white supremacy. And it's a luxury that you white people have had. And it's just part of the packaging for both kids of color and for kids who are white kids. That innocence is part of what we need to overcome, that, because that's part of white privilege. Yeah, that's where this is going. And they're melding these intersectionality, that they're doing intersectionality on us big time, that the whole thing is all packaged up together. And to object to that, to object to the explicit sex education, to kids being taught about this early in kindergarten, you see where this all goes. You racist if you object.
Now that is something I did not know. And yeah, that just...
When he told me about that, and I began to look for it, and there's quite a few good YouTubes out there by some of the conservative side expounding on this and how this is part of Marxism and Marxist thinking. Well,
oh yeah,
And that's where this is all going. And that's why they are so incensed, because many of the queer theory trained leftists and progressives already are on this track. They understand this.
Oh,
They're no longer offended by children losing their innocence, and deliberately so.
yeah. And that's where, I mean, you look at the book of Romans and you look at, what the word says, you talk about them being handed over,
Yeah.
their conscience seared. I always tell people that this whole issue, and it's tied equally in with the abortion issue, which, my husband and I always talk about how ironic that the pro-death advocates, they want to prance around and deal with the issue with the LGBT. Well, why would they care? They're never going to get pregnant, right? And it's just a full-out assault on the image of God and how we're created in his image. I actually had a pastor who was watching my show a couple years back. When he heard me say that, he messaged me. This was a pastor, and he said, "I never thought of that before." And I'm like, oh my gosh, had you read the Bible you supposedly preach out of, But that's where it goes. I mean, Satan does not like us because the image of God is in us. And,
it's not like the creation of new life, because
no.
it is hope for the future. And it is the one time where we are most connected, or could be, if we tenderize our hearts enough.
Right.
God, we're able to participate with God in the creation of a new human being and a new soul and a spirit. I mean, God creates that, but wow, if anything will draw you close to God, it's the birth of a new child. And if we've hardened our hearts to that, to the point where we're willing to discard these, then we'll go into all kinds of depraved. And he has turned so many people over to that depraved mind.
So speaking of that, we just saw the overturning of Roe, which was, in my mind, a complete miracle. I never thought I'd see this in my lifetime. What are your thoughts on that? And do you think that there's still hope, quote, for America, even though you had up Mission America? That was a joke, but you know what I mean. I know you do think there's hope, but talk to me about your reaction about that, because I thought that was a miracle.
I totally agree. It was when that ruling was, the brief was leaked in May. I thought, oh my goodness, this could actually ever happen. And when it actually did come out, and it was like what had been leaked, that was, I could not believe that. God is working so much in our culture to reveal to us the truth, like you cannot miss it. And what he's revealing is how the hard hearts of these people that are coming against all of this. And at the same time, all kinds of people on our side having to figure out, okay, exactly what do you believe? I mean, is that a child from conception? Are you going to go along with rape and incest exceptions? I mean, this is with the 10-year-old girl in Ohio. Okay, we're still finding out about this, so I don't want to talk too much about it because it's evolving hour by hour. But this is one of those very challenging and tough situations. But excuse me, the reality is that in every one of these cases, that's still a human being in there. And it's traumatizing for anybody to destroy a life that's inside them. I think, yet you have trauma to trauma. So anyway, it's compelling us to decide what it is we really believe.
Yeah, I will tell you that I have had kids canvassing for this next election. Mm-hmm. And there was a new candidate that I didn't know about, and the kids came, they gave me his thing. So I went to the website and looked it up. I read through his questionnaire, and I was seriously thinking about not voting for the incumbent. But when I read this guy's answer to the abortion question, he cited that he thought it was okay. And he's claiming to be a very conservative person. He said he thought it was okay during, rape and incest. And I was like, okay, you just lost my vote. You lost my vote because like I said this kind of jokingly, but I'll just say it again. And if you're an adult, you'll appreciate this. not every sexual interaction between husband and wife, goes great, right? I mean, sometimes the guy has more fun than the woman. Sometimes the woman might have more fun, and then poof, there's a baby, so you get mad at, how it was conceived. Yes, I understand the incest and rape. I'm a survivor of incest, okay? So I get that personally, but that's still no need to kill the baby, right? It's not their fault how they were conceived. So it is, anyway, it is frustrating, but I'm glad. Okay. And I got one more question and we're almost out of time, but my last question has to do with the generations, right? Now, I know that a lot of the people that I looked up to 20 years ago, they're all getting older, like I am. Now I'm in the middle-age bracket, and, some of my mentors, they're in their 70s, and, some of them have died, Do you have hope for my generation or those behind me, for what's going on with this particular issue? What's your opinion about all that? Because,
I really think there is it could go a number of ways. We are almost at a point of no return unless God intervenes in a very dramatic and probably devastating way in our country. Something has to change, people, because part of our problem is affluence. We are very spoiled in America. Yeah. And sexual self-indulgence and destroying your own children and, tossing away marriage and all of that is a part of a culture that thinks they can make it up as they go along and nothing will ever happen, that takes everything for granted. We need to stop taking these things for granted, even just the basics of life, because around the world, you don't see that. Christians are being persecuted around the world in grave, grave ways that we can't even identify with. Right. So I fear that that's coming. But out of some of that, God might be merciful and be more gentle with us. I don't know. I believe that the generation that is now in schools, public schools, there will be a backlash. They are seeing that some of this is total nonsense. I know that there are kids who go to school and see how the gay straight alliances rule the school, and they say, this is ridiculous. This is way out of proportion to even being kind to people. This is ridiculous that they're understanding the nonsense on which this is built, just talking points that are the same thing over and over and over. There's no depth of reporting on any of these, both in schools, outside of schools. I think there will be a change. I think there will be kids that will rise up and become the new conservatives, hopefully Christian conservatives in the next generation.
Yeah. Well, if this encourages you some, moving here to Tennessee, I meet a lot of California transplants like me, and a lot of them, they're in that age group. They're definitely in that age group. And I was talking to somebody yesterday, a young mother, probably her early 30s, 2 little babies, a 6-month-year-old and a 4-year-old. And she was like, yeah, I can't believe how bad it's gotten in the schools. I'm like, oh, good. Thank God. And she didn't identify as a Christian either. She said that she goes to a New Age church, which I thought was interesting. But she could see. And so I was like, good. I said, you might want to look at some homeschooling co-ops to help you, because, that's how it is. So
homeschooling has exploded everywhere. And Christian Catholic schools are having enrollments go way up. I mean, this is a very encouraging sign. And I'll tell you, if more things happen that are starting to squeeze people in the schools and parental rights, even the masking issue, if we get another situation where the National Education Association conspires with the Biden administration and they decide to mask children in schools again, parents are not going to put up with it. They're just not going to go there. Yeah. And that's what drew parents so much to the schools to begin with. But while they were there, they found out all this other stuff. So I have great encouragement for what I'm seeing. It's way more active than anything that I've seen during the 27 years I've been doing this.
I know, isn't it exciting on some ways? Has to be so awful that finally people are waking up, Yeah. So tell everybody where they can go and you listen to your show and all that stuff. And
well, missionamerica.com is our website. And if you scroll down, you can also see my book, Maybe It's Not Gay.
Totally forgot about the book. Sorry. Yeah, tell me about the book, because you know what? I'm so sorry. I forgot about that. I didn't have it in front of my nose.
It's right there. Scroll down. You can see that. Also, you can see the station for my radio show, which is here in Ohio, but you can listen archives. You can listen live streaming anywhere. It's thewordcolumbus.com, and read our articles, and lots of resources on there. So,
yeah. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Stacy, for hanging in there all these years and all your wealth of information and wisdom. And may God bless you. Continue to bless you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. There you go, everybody. Wasn't that a great interview with Linda Harvey from Mission America? Make sure, again, I know I'm repeating myself, but make sure you go over to missionamerica.com, get signed up for her email, and hey, you can listen to her daily commentaries right here online. So I want to encourage you to do that. Get her books. Reach out to her if you want her to speak somewhere, and just get in touch. Follow somebody who is advocating for biblical values and who isn't ashamed of the gospel, especially on the issue of the LGBT lobby. I mean, you heard so much today, and there's so much more. We just touched on the literal tip of the iceberg, and all that. And I want to thank you. If you've watched this show and you're watching this far, thank you so much for taking the time to invest your time with us, as we are part of the alternative media, right? We're the media that isn't bought and paid for, right? But we need your help. So if you like what we do here at Heart Tug International and Bible News Radio, please consider giving a tax deductible donation to our ministry. You can go over to our website, BibleNewsRadio.com, and you can donate over there. And if you're so led to become a monthly donor, that would even be better, because then we could expand our reach with your help. Also, don't forget my book, Pickleball Faith. This past week, I have to tell you, I was so excited. Pickleball Faith went national. We were covered on K-Love Radio, Christian radio. They covered our book, and you can go to our blog and you can look at that article. So it's something that's kind of cool that God did this week. So I hope you have a good week. Make sure that you have subscribed to our email list, and wherever you're watching this, make sure you hit subscribe, and do me a favor and share it out, because sharing is caring, isn't it, people? Yeah, it is. So please share it out. Invite your friends to come and tune into Bible News Radio. And don't forget, go through our archives. So much of what we produce is evergreen, which means that you can listen to it whenever, and you can go back. You can see some of the other fantastic interviews that we've done, and other broadcasts where they're not interviews, but it's just me talking about the news. You will learn a lot. By the way, I also want to tell you, I have a playlist on our YouTube channel. It's called The Marketing of Homosexuality to America. If you have not watched that series, please take the time to check it out. You will learn so much, I guarantee you. So make sure you put that in there and look for that. All right. So thank you again for tuning into the show. Remember to be bold, stand up, people, and go with God, because He loves you. Yeah, He does. And you got a mission right between your 2 feet. So you got to go out there and do the job that God has called you to.